Okay, a lot of people have been saying that Orient is the new Seiko, and this watch that we're looking at today, I think, is kind of driving that point home even more. It competes extremely well against the entry-level Seiko dive watches in terms of build quality and design, but it includes a sapphire crystal, and it actually has better lume at a significantly lower price. I don't know what to call this watch because it doesn't have a name yet, but for now, I'm just going to call it the Orient Kamasu XL. Let's take a look at it. Hey guys, this is Dave. Welcome back to Just the Watch. If you are interested in watch collecting but don't have a lot of money, definitely invite you to subscribe to the channel where I cover all kinds of affordable watches and talk about things that are related to watch collecting. And I live in Japan where Orient and Seiko and Citizen and Casio, all of these great affordable brands are based. So it's kind of a fun place to be. And I'm always excited when I get to take a look at a watch from this part of the world. And Orient definitely is that. They have an amazing range of affordable watches, and that range is growing. Today we're going to be taking a look at a new dive watch that they released last year, very similarly spec'd to the extremely popular Orient Kamasu. And this new dive watch from Orient I think is really cool because the Kamasu was such a big hit. I mean, in my opinion, the Kamasu is probably the best affordable dive watch you can get. And this new diver from Orient is very similarly spec'd to that, and I think it's going to wind up being very similarly priced to that as well. It's a little bit bigger, a little bit different design, so it's great to see them kind of opening up the range and starting to give you some options where if you didn't necessarily like the Kamasu or you wanted something a little bit different, a little bit bigger, now they're giving you some different choices there. And this is one that is a really great watch. I've really enjoyed it since I've gotten my hands on it. And it seems to be kind of flying under the radar, particularly outside of Japan. And one of the only reasons I think this watch isn't as popular outside of Japan is because of the pricing. It's only recently started dropping in price to the point where it's becoming competitive or a true alternative to the Kamasu. I really think when the price is settled that this watch is going to be readily available for around $250, partly because that's how much I can get it here in Japan for. And I think you'll see that in other parts of the world shortly as well. So it's kind of exciting to kind of show you guys this one now because I think it's one you should put on your radar. Start watching the price. Already I'm seeing it down to around $300 in America pretty regularly. Anyways, let's jump in and take a look and see what this watch actually is. And then afterwards we'll talk about how this pricing is working and why I think this is going to drop down into that $250 price range. Now I purchased this watch myself here in Japan in order to do this review to share it with you guys. Anyways, let's take a look. Okay, so this comes in Orient's sort of entry-level box, standard packaging there, and this is coming in for a closer look at the Orient RA-AC0K. So let's try and take in what we have here. I think there's a lot of influences that people have spotted. Probably the most obvious would be the Seiko SKX. That's the first thing I thought of when I saw this. It's a larger watch, similar in size to the SKX, but you're definitely getting that 4 o'clock crown with the crown guards down there. Case shape is kind of similar to that. But a lot of people have looked at this on Instagram and told me it looks like a Rolex Submariner, which the case is nothing like it, but the bracelet and the bezel kind of, has that feel to it. Anyways, this is kind of a larger size watch for Orient. Let's talk about the dimensions real quick. You're getting 43 millimeters across, so fairly large watch there. 51 millimeters lug to lug, so yeah, again, on the larger side, but only 13 millimeters tall. So Orient kind of billed this as a slimmed down Triton, but whatever you want to call it, this is Orient's kind of medium to large size diver now. And I think it's really cool that they're offering these sort of different sizes. This is one where you're getting the sapphire crystal, which is a great feature at this price point for a Japanese-made dive watch. But let's go ahead and take a look and see what they're giving you here. So you are getting a screw-down crown at 4 o'clock, also with a 4 o'clock date. You'll notice that at the 4 o'clock date, they are giving you a half index there, and that date is really well lined up at 4 o'clock. I like the white date window there. It stands in very nicely as an index. The crown is screw down to help with that 200 meters of water resistance. And you are getting two very distinct positions for the date change and for the time change. Very smooth operation there, so that's always nice to see. You can see this is a hacking movement. Second hand has stopped when I pull the crown all the way out. And the movement feels very smooth. This movement does have a standard beat rate, beating at 6 ticks per second. Now, as Orient does with a lot of their watches, you are getting their kind of a little bit large and detailed logo right at the 12 o'clock, but the rest of the dial is fairly sparse. You're just getting water resist 200 meters at the bottom. They've gone with really classic indexes that are really loaded with LUME here. We'll see a LUME shot in a minute, but the LUME is awesome on this watch. Kind of a trapezoid at 12 o'clock to help with orienting it quickly. Circles for most of everything, but then at the 3, 6, and 9, you're getting rectangles. The handset reminds me a lot of the Kamasu. You get that arrow-shaped hour hand and then kind of a sword-shaped minute hand. Kind of a little bit of an elegant look to it. The bezel is 120 click, unidirectional bezel. The action is interesting. Like, it reminds me a lot of Seiko's bezels, if you've tried that, which is very different from most of the Swiss watches or micro-brand watches I've tried. It's more of a softer, spongy feel to it. I don't like it as much, but it's not bad. The clicks feel more kind of springy instead of solid inside of it, if that makes any sense. However, the bezel has a very aggressive coin edge that is very easy to grip, so I really like that. There's no problem getting a hold of this and turning it, so very useful, functional bezel. And it does have only a hint of backplay to it. This is an aluminum bezel insert, so you're not getting ceramic or sapphire. But I like the look of it. It's kind of a little bit of a classic look now. Reminds me of a little bit more vintage watches. This particular colorway is a green colorway. The bezel is a little bit brighter, truer green, whereas the dial is kind of this, maybe sort of a moss green with, some little bit of brown tones in there. It's kind of a glossy dial. It's a very nice color. I really enjoyed wearing it. Sort of complementing the green, you've got this orange tipped second hand that I think, adds a nice little splash of color to it. Looks great. And, Orient, I think they really specialize in these sort of a little bit dressed up dive watches. They have kind of a combination of like a really tool watch aesthetic, but then with, a little bit of, classier, dressier elements. You are getting standard 22 millimeter lugs, so you'll have a lot of strap options there. The bracelet links are solid. They feel very well made, fully brushed with polished sides, which matches the finishing of the watch. You're getting brushed top lugs and then polished on the side case of the watch. Now the clasp is just a pressed clasp, so not the highest quality clasp you can see in there. Again, very typical from what you would find from like Seiko at this price range and, most of Orient's watches. Another sort of lower end feature is that the end links are hollow end links. And I think because of that, because of the clasp and the end links, the bracelet does feel a little bit rattly. And even when I first got it, it was a little bit squeaky on the wrist, on the hinges. That seems to have mostly remedied itself as I've worn it. It's kind of loosened up a little bit. The finishing on the watch is very well done. You can see you are getting a sign crown there. And you are getting a mix of brushed and polished surfaces. So you've got this brushing on the top of the lugs with a nice transition into the polished side of the case. A little bit of a chamfered edge there. You can kind of catch that, a little bit of a lip. The side of the case has a really beautiful kind of curve to it that looks really good with that polishing. Kind of a little bit of a bulbous look to the side of it. And then the lugs also have a nice curve too. So the overall case conforms to the wrist very well. So even though this is a large watch, it is extremely comfortable on the wrist, due in part to that 13 millimeter height and the case design. The sapphire crystal is completely flat. It does a relatively good job of warding off reflections, overall keeping the dial very legible. Overall, the watch finishing and dial materials and everything has a very simple, classic look, but yeah, just really gorgeous overall. I really love the kind of shimmer that the dial has to it in certain lightings, and just the way the color kind of comes and goes, where sometimes you can see that green very visibly, and other times it fades almost to a black, deep dark green. Now, as I mentioned, the watch is very comfortable on the wrist. I have a 7.5-inch wrist, and this watch wears perfectly for me. I mean, it is just a real treat to wear. You can see it just really conforms the wrist well. You are getting female end links, so the bracelet will drop from that 51 millimeters directly down if you need it to. you know, for me, it kind of goes out a little bit more. There are 4 micro adjusts on there, so I was able to get a really good fit on the bracelet too, which also helps a lot with the wearability. But this is definitely one that looks a lot better in person and on the wrist than it did in the product shots online. You know, I wasn't particularly excited to get this one. You know, I got it primarily to review on the channel, but after getting it in hand, I really like it. It just really is a gorgeous watch. But let's go ahead and move on and check out the LUME. So one of the things that impressed me the most about this Orient diver is the LUME. The LUME is by far the best that I have seen in this price range. Now, this is a watch that I paid $250 for, and you know, I'm putting it up against some other watches right here that have average LUME that cost more than this one, and it completely blows them away. Here you have the Spinnaker Spence and the Aquatico Poseidon, and both of those have average decent LUME, but you can see that the Orient is just really outshining them. So I had to put it up against some better watches in my collection, and I went and rounded up the brightest watches that I have. And 2 of the watches in this lineup have X1 grade superluminova, which is supposed to last extra long. And I don't really know what kind of LUME the Orient has, so that's why I wanted to try and see how it would fare. And I was surprised at how well it did. And after an hour's time, the Orient is beating out the Horizons and is only slightly behind the Axios. So those top 3 are clearly beating out the other 2 that don't have X1 grade superluminova, which leads me to believe that this Orient has a LUME that is basically on par with what you would expect from X1. But the thing about X1 is it's supposed to last a long time, so I went ahead and ran this for a full 3 hours to kind of give it a little bit more of a stress test, and the Orient continued to hold out. It's still behind the Axios, but it actually increased its lead over the Horizons. And this watch cost half of what both of those watches, both the Horizons and the Axios, retail for around $500. Again, I picked this one up for $250 from Amazon Japan here. So incredibly bright. I don't know what it is, but it is definitely beating out the Seiko Luma Bright, and it is, again, it's on par with the X1 grade superluminova watches that I have in my collection. So super impressive LUME from Orient here. All right, so why do I think this watch is going to drop down into the $250 range? Well, because basically the same thing happened with the Kamasu. And this is just the way it is with watches, especially new releases. When this watch first became available in the US, it was only available from Orient's official website where they charged the full retail price. And the full retail price on this watch is $515. And so I think when a lot of people saw that, they kind of freaked out and thought, well, this is a complete ripoff because you can get the Kamasu for down to around $200. The other thing that a lot of people were kind of concerned about is that this is basically a stripped down version of the Neptune or the Triton, which is an amazing dive watch that Orient released a few years ago that shares basically the same case. It's a little bit thicker, but it has a power reserve indicator and it has a diver certification. And those Tritons or Neptunes are currently going for around $350 to $400, which is kind of an insane deal for those specs. This watch really is the Triton without the power reserve indicator, without the diver certification, so you're still getting the 200 meters of water resistance, but it's not certified, and it's a slightly thinner case. Other than that, it's basically the same watch. And so when people saw the retail price of $500 and they saw the Triton for sale for $350, they thought, again, complete ripoff. But if you look at the actual retail prices of the Kamasu, this watch, and the Triton, you'll see that they're actually kind of tells a different story. On Orient USA's website, the Kamasu sells for $460. The Triton is listed at about $710. So what's really happened is that the Kamasu and the Triton are selling well under the retail price. They've hit the gray market. They're becoming widely available at a greatly discounted price off of the MSRP, whereas this new watch is just starting to get there. For a while, you could only buy it at the retail price, but now I've seen it on Amazon for as low as $300. And again, here in Japan, you can easily pick them up for around $250. And that kind of makes sense because the MSRP of this watch is basically $50 more than the MSRP of the Kamasu. So I think that's where you're going to see this price drop down to and where it's going to kind of settle in. And you're going to wind up with the Kamasu and then this watch as being kind of your two options for a budget watch with a sapphire crystal, with Orient's in-house Japanese automatic movement, excellent LUME, well-spec'd, built in Japan, with 2 slightly different designs and 2 slightly different sizes. And the rumor is that the Triton and the Neptune is going to be phased out by Orient. They're going to stop carrying it. So if you're interested in those extra features of the power reserve and that diver certification, I would definitely recommend you head over and try and grab that one quickly before it goes away. But for me, picking up this watch that we're reviewing today in the $250 to $300 price range, I think is a great price for what they're offering. It's one that really kind of surprised me in how much I liked it. And if you're drawn to the watch after seeing the footage of it in this video, I think it's one that you're not going to be disappointed in if you purchase. Especially if you're interested in kind of an entry-level Seiko dive watch, I think this is definitely one to look at. This has a lot of the same strengths that Seiko offers, except it has a sapphire crystal and even stronger lume, which is one of Seiko's biggest selling points. And it does that at a price that is significantly less than your entry-level Seiko dive watches. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching, and definitely drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this watch and Orient in general, if you think that this is a true Seiko killer. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.